Welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, hosted by Mark Vina, your home for candid, insightful, and provocative conversations about the smart home automation, security, smartphones, PC and console gaming, and much more.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today is Thursday, October 6th, 2022. Joining me for today's podcast are Stuart Wolpin, who scribes for Popular Mechanics, AARP, Techlicious, Investopedia, and other wonderful publications. John Quain, who writes for the New York Times, Smart Cities, and Tom's Guide. Rob Pecoraro, who writes frequently for Tech Policy for Wirecutter, PC Mag, and USA Today. And I am so excited. Joining us for the first time today is Angela Mascaritolo, who is a smart home and wearables analyst at PC Mag. Folks, how are each of you today?
Very good. Very well.
Good. Thank you.
Angela, I did pronounce your last name correctly?
Yes, I'm impressed. Thank you. You did that well.
No, because, your name sounds like, I was thinking, people's names sound like certain things. Your last name could be a wine. Give me a bottle.
It's long, but it's phonetic. So if you sound it out, it's a bit intimidating, but it's straightforward.
Well, versus Rob's name, which sounds like a diner somewhere in Hackensack, New Jersey.
I like Jersey diners. I'll take that as a compliment.
Let's go down to Pecoraro's. They have a good cheesesteak sandwich. Okay, yeah. So we're really excited to have you. For those of you just listening in, I met Angela at IFA a few weeks ago, and she does a wonderful job of looking at the wearables smart home category. So she's the perfect person to have on this podcast. But let's tee up the first topic here. And that is, this week, we the Connectivity Standards Alliance. That sounds so formal. They finalized the Matter 1.0 specification. For those people who don't know, Matter has been, I certainly want to tee this up for Angela right off the bat. Matter, I think, is going to be a wonderful thing once it gets into place, but it has kind of a Waiting for Godot-like feeling to it. That's an old theatrical reference where there's a bunch of characters waiting for God to show up. And I feel like, this should make the world a lot safer not safer for the smart home, but easier to participate in the smart home with interoperability. It doesn't matter what voice assistant you're using, but I'm glad that they finalized the specification. Part of the challenge with the smart home, as everybody knows, you really have to, spend some brain power worrying about what voice assistant you're using when you select a device, because it's not uncommon for a device not to work in other ecosystems. But nothing has shown up yet. They have lots and lots of participation. The CSA has done a great job of getting everybody on board. I want to say they have over 800 players or 850 participants, some big number, but there's nothing you can buy quite yet. And it's been delayed 2 or 3 times. So, it's kind of like it's time to put your money where your mouth is, CSA. So, Angela, let me get your thoughts and, what's your take on Matter? And do you think Waiting for Godot is too overstated?
So I've talked to a lot of people about this, and there's a lot of excitement within the smart home industry about it. We'll have to see what happens. Right now, it's a lot of buzzwords, and it's a little bit confusing to understand what it's actually going to do and what it's actually going to improve. From what I understand, it's not going to make you able to control something that to use like Siri commands for Alexa, or Alexa commands to control a Apple connected device. So I'm not quite sure what it's going to do right now. Okay, I have everything. I use all of them. I use, Google Home, I use Alexa, and I use Siri, all of them. And I find it pretty easy, the voice control piece. What I think this may improve upon is the automation aspect and the routines, which right now are very manual to set up. It may make that stuff a little bit easier to set up. So one device working with another one. The vendors may be able to automate that for you instead of having to manually set it up. So we'll see. I don't know. I mean, I'm like cautiously optimistic about it, but right now it's sort of a lot of buzzwords is my thoughts. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Stuart.
Well, I mean, it's like Angel said, it's really all in the implementation. We really don't have a clue as to how any of these companies are going to implement, how much they're going to protect their walled silos, their walled gardens. I mean, right now there is some interoperability between devices, but the problem is that when you get a device that works on one system and you try to set it up, for instance, if a Google Assistant compatible or Alexa compatible, you sometimes have to end up going into the Alexa settings and point it to another device. And when you give the voice command, it's, oh, please, Alexa, please tell this other device to tell this other device to do something. And the strings that you have to create within the Amazon Alexa app or the Google app to set all of that up. And then remember, the syntax is, at least even for us who know what we're doing, is maddening, much less, the poor mom and pop at home trying to simply want to automate their light switches would drive them crazy, which I think is why they're doing this, to address the fact that most normal people have a hard time setting these up. Whether or not this solves the problem is, like, as Angela said, it's all in the implementation and how easy they actually make these automation setups.
Well, at the simplest level, I think what it's trying to overcome is you have to remember a wake word. If you have, and I find that a problematic, because you could have one device in your home that only works with HomeKit or only works with Google Assistant. And, especially if you've got guests over, you've got different people, and, the average person is not going to have the patience to remember different wake words. Now, Stuart, you bring up a good issue, and that's the thing that I'm really waiting with bated breath in. What is the baseline level of functionality that Matter compliance will provide? Because as you know, and I think you've said it very eloquently, Stuart, every device manufacturer still wants to differentiate their product. They want to say their smart light bulb is better than ABC's smart bulb. And if there are certain features that can only be activated by that company's native app, well, that's kind of kludgy, to be quite honest with you. So how robust is that baseline functionality going to be? John, what are your thoughts? John?
Well, I agree. The integration is the big problem with this, right? And whether or not it makes it easy, as Stuart pointed out, if you have to go through all these machinations to get the blinds to work with the lights and your TV and the temperature control, just to say good night, blank, then it's not very helpful. I mean, aside from the fact that I suppose, yes, it's compatibility, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this game is like already over because of Alexa. Oops, I said the word anyway. Because of Alexa and Google Assistant. I'm watching the flashing light in my room here. So everything works with that. That's the easiest thing for the consumer. Getting them to do the kind of control system stuff. Stuart, back in the day, what was it, 20 some odd years ago? We would do these like fancy automated control smart home systems for the home that would do,
X10.
C4 would do like the TV and cost like $5,000 thing. And that was too complicated for most people. I'm not sure that there's a lot. It's interesting. I don't know that its time may have come and gone already.
Well, Rob, to close us out on this, I think Angela said something really interesting, is that we're kind of past the dawn of the smart home, in that, now it's kind of novel. I can turn a light on, or I can open my garage door with a single command. The real value of the smart home is, what I like to call Smart 2.0 or Smart Home 3.0, whatever you want to call it, that it links multiple tasks together with multiple devices, and they're dependent on things that you don't necessarily have to activate. For example, if I'm coming home, my smart home realizes I'm pulling into the garage, so it automatically opens the garage door. It turns the lights on. It unlocks the door, that kind of thing. There's different ways that you can enable that. But that's, I'm not saying it's out of reach. The five of us are probably capable of and having the patience to automate that with the different routines that are necessary. But I don't think the average person has the technical capability to. It's not that it's highly technical. It's very monotonous. It's almost like programming in a way. So, Rob, do you agree with that, or do you think that?
First of all, thank y'all for reminding me that at some point, the Amazon Echo in the kitchen stopped talking to the Hue connected light bulbs 2 rooms away, and I need to fix that, and I don't know how. Second of all, what difference this makes is going to depend a lot on packaging and presentation. How big is the Matter logo on the side of the box or on the product listing page on Amazon or Best Buy's site? And how quickly do people see that and associate that with, oh, this is just another bit of graphic design, or this is the stamp that tells me I'm future-proofed. It doesn't lock me into any one ecosystem, any one company's smart home hub. To the extent one drives the other, it can simplify things a little bit and take away one less question, where I can tell people, well, look for this thing first of all. Then you can try to narrow your shopping a little bit.
Well, I can tell you for a fact, being an old product guy, is that product managers and product vice presidents do not like giving more real estate on a retail package to a certification label that they absolutely must have to do. So I don't think you're going to see the Matter logo on half the box. And I agree with you. I mean, that's going to be the challenge, because the CSA is a standard, it's a not-for-profit standards body, and they're certainly not going to spend money on demand generation. It's all going to have to come from the manufacturers. So, getting the word out, it's going to depend on folks like us, as we review these products and how we assess them. I know Stuart looks surprised because I just kind of gave him a compliment.
Sorry, this is your job now.
So Google is going to be, or is letting third parties utilize its home and away signals. So the devices know if you are in the house or not, and it will respond accordingly. Like if you're out of the house, or if it senses or thinks that you're out of the house, it will lower your thermostat to save money on energy. But this doesn't always work. So sometimes if you're in a different room, it may, this has happened to me, with the Nest thermostat, it would be changing. It would be thinking I was away from home when I really wasn't away from home, and changing my thermostat. And I'd be like, why is it hot in here? And I'd look at my phone and it'd be like, changed it to like 77 degrees. And I'm like, okay, well, this is annoying. And I just turned all of that off. But, instead of just changing the thermostat, it did all these other things that you when it was supposed to do when you were away from the house. Like, so the idea is, you leave the house, and then the robot vac, it'll connect that signal with your Roomba. So it knows to automatically start cleaning the house, or it knows to start the air purifier when you leave, or when the temperature drops to 75 outside, then your blinds go down, or whatever it may be. Whether it works, we'll see, whether it's one more in the
I think you're right. So we're obviously going to revisit this topic, and I hope, Angela, you may be able to. Hope you can join us then after CES. When to me, that's kind of the ninth inning. If we don't see really products that are working, not demos, but products that are working at CES, I think people are going to be very, very disappointed. Let us hit the next topic here, and this is a topic that I really want to get Rob and Angela to opine on, but let's talk about the new Apple Watch Series 8. I just bought a Series 8, and we're going to talk about Pixel Watch as well. But Angela, we haven't really chatted about this, but my strategy when I upgrade my watches, because I've been an Apple Watch guy since day one. Maybe it's a crazy philosophy, but I tend to not to upgrade every generation. I upgrade every other generation, because I feel that Apple doesn't make enough improvements in the prior generation to rationalize it. So I figure if they jump a generation, when you go from, let's say, 1 to 3 or 3 to 5, or for me it's 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, that's where you see real improvements. And I have had a Series 8 now for about since day one, actually, since they began to ship. I'm wondering right now, did I make the right move? I don't see a big performance difference. The battery life is about the same. But anyway, let me get you to opine, because you've been playing with them for some time.
Yeah, slight improvement on the battery life with the Series 8. And so we have the Series 8 and then the Ultra this year for the Apple Watch. And the models for Samsung we have are the Galaxy Watch 5 and then the Watch 5 Pro. And now we have the new Pixel Watch, which, as we're filming this, was just announced, or they just announced more details of it today. And for the Apple Watch, it's the same design, the Series 8, exact same design as last year. I have the Series 7 right here. This is the small one, but the large one, the 45 millimeter, they look exactly the same as last generation. So no design change there. The big thing is the temperature sensor in this generation of wearables with Samsung and Apple. But it's really disappointing that Samsung made such a big deal out of adding the temperature sensor to their wearables, and we don't have software support. So you can't actually see any kind of temperature data right now. And they tell me that they're working with third parties. But I don't understand why they don't just integrate this into Samsung Health. Are they not confident with the sensor? I don't know. But yeah, so with the Apple Watch, the main thing that there's a new tile in the Health app where it'll show your temperature deviations. Now, this is not going to tell you your actual body temperature, 98.6. It's not going to tell you that. It takes your baseline temperature over several days when you wear it to bed. And then after like 5 nights, it'll tell you whether you were running hotter or colder compared to your baseline. So it'll say you were up like 0.1 degree. You see that it could be an early indication that you're getting sick. This is also powering new estimated ovulation, retrospective ovulation estimate. So they're using your body temperature to tell you when you last ovulated, if you have a menstrual cycle. This could be helpful if you're trying to get pregnant. For everyone else, it's irrelevant.
Now, it does have crash detection.
Crash detection.
The iPhone has it as well. And I saw a story the other day, by the way. I don't know whether it was a Series 8 watch or a phone, but these crash detection worked. Unfortunately, the people in the car died, so that's not good. Actually, let me get Rob to talk about the Pixel watch, because I want to get his perspective. And then I want to get Stuart's opinion and John's opinion on, when you buy an Apple Watch, you kind of still have to be married to the Apple ecosystem. Yeah, there is there is a way of untethering the watch from an iPhone, but I want to get your perspective, Stuart and John, on that whole untethering piece and whether that matters in terms of selecting a smartwatch in your estimation. But Rob, why don't you go ahead on Pixel?
So yeah, I watched Google's presentation Thursday morning, and interesting pitch they've got here, where they're basically they've rebooted the entire smartwatch effort. Because I remember when they first introduced Android Wear watches, they were okay, but nothing that special. And then they realized they picked the wrong company to make their chipset. Qualcomm just had no interest in doing a smartphone chipset at all. The watches got older and older. Nobody wore one. The only smartwatches I saw people wearing were Apple Watches. Last year, they introduced Wear OS, where they anointed Samsung as their chipset vendor. And Samsung, in turn, said, okay, we'll give you our chipset. We'll stop making our own OS. We'll adopt yours. And now with the Pixel Watch, we have the pure Google version of this. So it looks nice in pictures. People who were at the event said it was not too chunky to wear, which is a problem with a lot of smartwatches these days. Battery life, Google is saying up to 24 hours. From looking at the spec sheet, I'm a little disappointed to see you can't just put this thing on a standard Qi cordless charger and have it charge that way. It looks like it needs its own magnetic USB-C cable, which is yet another thing to pack in your gadget bag on a trip. So I don't know. I'm intrigued. At the same time, so far, I haven't worn a watch of any kind in I don't know how long. So we'll see. I've definitely thought, every time I'm biking and I'm looking for directions, it would be handy to see the directions right on the screen on my wrist.
The one thing that is kind of interesting is that the Apple with the Watch OS for the new watches, is it on 9 version? 9?
Yes, WatchOS 9. Yep.
That does have a new feature, and I think it works with older generations of watches, where it will go into a power reserve capability and cut back on power. And I found it actually pretty dramatic in that if you're flying what it essentially does, if let's say you're flying to Berlin for IFA, it will know that your phone is off, so there's no connectivity. It will know that there's no cellular connection if you have the cellular version, and it can drop back power. It doesn't turn off, but it really throttles back on the power. And I found that it really boosted the watch quite a bit because there's a lot of situations. I'm often in a situation where the phone is off or the I don't have connectivity, and why have the watch being powered all the time? So that is a nice little feature of the new Watch OS for Apple. But Stuart, let me turn this over to you in terms of what is your. Are you a smartwatch guy? I've never really noticed whether.
Well, since Angela has come with show and tell, yes, I have the 7. I upgraded from the 3. It took me that long to finally succumb to the Apple upgrade path. So this is my 3rd. I had the 1, the 3, and now the 7. The whole untethering issue to me is, I won't say it's a non-issue necessarily, but the benefit of staying within an ecosystem, I think, are obvious, whether it's Android, Wear OS, or whether it's Apple OS, because the most functionality you're going to get out of these devices if it's within the ecosystem for which it was designed. Now, and a lot of this also depends on markets. In the US, the iPhone has more than 50% or around 50% market share. So half the people in the country own an Apple phone, so are going to be, they're not going to buy an Android watch. It doesn't make any sense. So at least in the US market, I don't think the tethering or untethering is a big deal. And from the Apple point of view, the more they tie it to their OS, the more they're hoping that they turn Android customers into iPhone customers.
Correct.
Because I think the whole idea of creating the ecosystem is to not, I mean, they obviously made iTunes available to everybody, but I think the idea on the device side is to draw people into the Apple OS. So whether or not Apple encourages untethering or makes it available, I can't imagine that it's a full-throated effort. And I don't see why they should make it a full-throated effort. They want to attract people to their ecosystem, so you'll buy an iPhone, so you'll buy a MacBook, that sort of thing.
Right.
That sort of strategy.
John,
This stuff has always struck me as yes, all for watches for people who don't wear watches. That kind of the crowd demographic you're trying to anticipate. I still have this. It's a Sunto watch. It does all the stuff except take phone calls and all that. And it lasts for like 2 weeks on a charge. And it's connected and it tracks me where I go. So the utility of these is it's a different demographic. If you're a watch person, you're going to wear a Garmin Phoenix. You're going to wear one of these other watches that does a lot more in terms of fitness tracking and is a lot more rugged and is going to survive anything. And also doesn't need to be charged every day, which is crazy. Like, how are you supposed to do the sleep monitoring if you've got to charge your watch? So when are you charging it during breakfast or something? I don't know. Anyway,
yeah,
it's not
during breakfast. That's exactly correct, John.
Try wearing this to bed. I mean, I had to wear at one point when I was testing the sleep tracking, this one and this one, the 2 biggest ones, one on each wrist, plus the Aura on my finger. I'm like, this is hell. Can I say that? Like, my job has a lot of perks, but that's not one of them. Oh, you have the Aura too?
Angela, I would like to just close this out with your comments on the Ultra, because I'm a kind of guy that when I do buy a piece of tech, I always buy the highest end of whatever it is, even if it's more than what I need. And to me, the Ultra, unless you're going to go into the Atlantic Ocean and search for the Titanic and go underwater, why would I want to buy an Ultra? I mean, it is bigger, it's bulkier, as you've indicated, but can you find a use case for non-swimmers?
It's the battery life.
Well, that is what.
Go ahead, John.
I think that the diving watch, that actually isn't a thing, because that is an expensive piece of equipment if you're a diver. And so being able to do that these watches can do that, that's really interesting. That's a big sort of step forward, and no reason why they can't. So I was like, wow, that's going to eliminate a whole category of stuff that I had used.
And when I tested it, I absolutely love. There's an exclusive new depth app on the Apple Watch Ultra, and so this has a depth sensor. So when you go underwater, and I tested this, and it was so much fun. When you go underwater at least 3 feet, it automatically starts tracking how far you go down and your duration underwater. So when you get above the surface, or even underwater, if you have goggles on, you can look at the watch and it'll tell you how far down you went and then how long you were underwater. And it works really well. It's so much fun. I can just see kids having a lot of fun with it. I don't know what kid is going to be able to have access to it, but I mean, I even had fun with that. But for anyone who is free diving, I live in Florida, so there's a lot of people around here. It's actually the first one that's approved for jet ski use and other high velocity water sports. I actually took it on a jet ski. We have the review. Anybody who lives by the water who does not mind the design, that's my big problem with it. It's just too big. It's just too bulky. It's not something I'm going to wear day to day. I think you mentioned. I'm sorry.
It's
$799. You can get 2 Series 8s for the same price. So yeah.
One for
And
each.
Mark, just as a side, they found the Titanic.
I know. I'm aware of that. Thank you, Clive Cussler. I really appreciate it. Save the Titanic. That was a great book. The movie wasn't that good. All right, let us go to the last topic, which will be a lot of fun here. This is the old Stuart Walpin in your wheelhouse type of topic. The Supreme Court is going to hear a bunch of social media immunity cases on Section 230 of the 1996 Communications Decency Act, which essentially gives immunity to social media companies. But it's going to be interesting, shall we say? And let me just tee this up for Stuart. Go ahead, T. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, there are 2 cases. There's one that's against Google. There's one against Twitter. They both involve suing the companies for advancing information that led to terrorist attacks. The difference between the 2 of them are the Google case is about Section 230. The Twitter case is not. The Twitter case, even though they are both predicated on the social media services advancing the case for using algorithms to advance terrorist communications on YouTube for Google and on Twitter, they're predicated on different legal bases. Overall, the problem is that they've already gone through circuit court rulings, and the circuit courts have essentially said, at least on the Google side, that they had to rule in favor of Google only because of past precedent and Section 230. And now that the Supreme Court is going to take it up, but the circuit court has said if they had their druthers, they wouldn't want to rule on it at all, that this is a legislative issue. And I think at heart at all of this is, no matter which way the courts rule, they're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the courts can only rule on the law that is there. They're being able to parse and separate the algorithm from the regular content is the issue at heart here. And what they're going to have to decide is whether or not algorithms are covered under in each of these cases as free speech, and whether or not the social media site is responsible for them. So I think what needs to happen here is not the courts, but the legislature to better define Section 230 and to define whether algorithms are covered, because the algorithms, the social media sites, remember, their main talking points here are, we have no control over what users put on our sites. Yes. We're going to monitor it, but it's up to them. We're not responsible for what anybody posts. And they're also claiming that they're not responsible for the algorithms, even though they've created the algorithm. So personally, what I would like to see is a ruling simply on the algorithm and whether or not the algorithms are covered under either Section 230 or free speech laws or not, and leave the rest of it all by itself. I think the algorithms is the key piece of this.
Right. John? John, you're on mute.
His lips are moving, but we're not.
We're not hearing John. Let's flip over to Rob. Rob, your thoughts?
So, yeah. So first of all, I was hoping the Supreme Court would take a different CDA 230 case, which is the challenges to the what I think are clearly unconstitutional laws passed by Florida and Texas that essentially say social platforms cannot moderate content based on any political view, which, and I've read the Texas law in full twice, basically tells Facebook, Twitter, you have to keep the Nazis on. You can't kick off ISIS. You can't keep out the QAnon cultists because they're all political views, as loathsome as they may be. And it's what happens when you write laws because you're angry that Twitter and Facebook kicked your dear leader off their platforms after January 6th. Well, tough. So this is a narrower case. And the issue here is when we say algorithm, like the algorithm, we're also talking like, can you have a search function? Because that's got to do some ranking of its own. What is the most relevant result? You can get into an issue of, well, what if the content is suggested? Like, you look at, I'm going to bring up the Twitter app on my iPad. Let's see what's in the trending topics. It's always a mistake to look at that. I don't want to do that. And so there's some editorial judgment being made. But on the other hand, editorial judgment, that's a First Amendment issue. So I don't know. There are a lot of ugly things that happen on social media that are not covered by CDA 230, but may not be fairly coverable by any law that will also be compliant with the First Amendment.
Yeah, what kind of scares me, and I think Stuart's right, a lot of the attention in these two cases, or at least one of the cases, but perhaps two, will be focused on the algorithm issue. And what really scares me is when lawyers and non-technical people get into understanding what was the intent of this algorithm. I mean, because programmers can be very cagey. I mean, they can write algorithms in such a way that the average person is, well, there's nothing to really worry. I can understand why the code is the code, and it's doing some things that if you're a technical person, you'd understand. Well, it is skewing the results in a certain way. So, and that really is, I think, it's really going to be the crux of these cases, and it's going to be fascinating. Angela, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, and as you guys said, it will be very interesting to see what happens, and this could have big implications for social media. If social media loses, they could be punished for promoting some types of controversial material. And right now, they're basically totally freed from responsibility for the content posted by users under Section 230. And Section 230 was enacted before the rise of social media. So, perhaps it is worth reevaluating.
I think we are going to see some reevaluation of Section 230. It's coming from both sides of the political aisle for different reasons, by the way, but it's coming. And now we've got, it looks like the Twitter deal is going to happen. It looks like Mr. Musk, which is John Quinn's best friend, John can't talk at his microphone right now, so I can make jokes about that. But this is going to be a very interesting next 90 days, because if Musk does get control over Twitter and that transaction does happen, you're going to see a complete reevaluation at Twitter in terms of what they allow on their site, and good and bad. And there will be some good. There'll also be some bad associated with that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this kind of plays out here. And as I mentioned before, unfortunately, John's microphone's not working, but we'll get him to provide us additional comments on the next podcast that we have. So anyway, folks, Angela, Rob, John, Stuart, thanks for taking the time to join me for today's podcast.
Thank you.
For our viewing and listening audience, thanks for making sure that the SmartTechCheck podcast is part of your day or commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Mark Vina Tech Guy. And until next time, have a great week.